The air in the capital had grown heavy, thick with the scent of unspoken secrets. For Oda Nobunaga, the triumph of entering Kyoto had begun to feel like a gilded cage. The great ring of fire that the shogun had whispered into existence was no longer a shadow. It was a tightening noose. From every direction, the old powers of Japan, those who had ruled through bloodline and ancient religious rite, were beginning to move. They did not see a unifier. They saw a man who dared to look at a map of the world and believe he could rewrite it. They saw a threat to the very fabric of their reality. The first crack in the ice appeared in the north. The Asakura clan, an ancient and proud family, refused to acknowledge Nobunaga's authority. When Nobunaga marched to deal with them, the trap was sprung. His own brother-in-law, the young and respected Azai Nagamasa, who had married Nobunaga's beloved sister Oichi, chose the old bonds of friendship over his alliance with the Oda. Nobunaga found himself caught between two armies, his retreat cut off, and his life hanging by a single thread of fate. It was a moment that would have broken a lesser man. But Nobunaga did not break. He hardened. He escaped the trap in a desperate, freezing march through the mountains, returning to Kyoto with a heart that had grown cold. He realized then that honor was a mask that men wore only when it suited them. From that day forward, he would not ask for loyalty. He would command it through fear. But the most dangerous enemies were not the samurai in the valleys. They were the gods on the mountain. Standing just northeast of Kyoto was Mount Hiei, a peak that had been considered sacred for nearly 800 years. At its summit sat Enryaku-ji, a massive complex of hundreds of temples, home to the Tendai monks. These were not the peaceful, meditating monks of legend. These were the Sohei, warrior monks who wore saffron robes over suits of iron mail, carrying heavy naginata blades that had tasted the blood of many challengers. To the common person, the monks of Mount Hiei were the voice of the heavens. To attack them was to invite a curse upon one's soul for 1,000 lifetimes. Because of this spiritual shield, the mountain had become a sanctuary for Nobunaga's enemies. The Asakura and Azai soldiers, after fleeing from Nobunaga's guns, would retreat into the holy grounds of the temple, knowing that no samurai would dare to shed blood on such sacred soil. The monks provided them with food, weapons, and a place to hide, all while claiming they were men of peace. Nobunaga sent messengers to the mountain. He did not want to destroy the temples. He wanted the monks to remain neutral. He offered them a choice. Stay out of the wars of men, or face the consequences. The monks laughed. They believed they were untouchable. They believed the ancient spirits of the mountain and the weight of 8 centuries of history would protect them from a fool from Owari. They ignored his warnings and continued to shelter the men who were trying to kill him. On a crisp autumn morning in 1571, the sun rose over Mount Hiei, but its light was obscured by a rising wall of gray smoke. Nobunaga had arrived at the base of the mountain with 30,000 men. He did not pause to pray. He did not offer incense. He gave a single, chilling command. Burn it all. His generals hesitated. Even the most hardened warriors trembled at the thought of what they were about to do. They whispered of divine punishment, of the wrath of Buddha, and of the ghosts that would haunt them to their graves. But Nobunaga's gaze was as sharp as a winter frost. He told them that these were not men of God. They were demons in robes, who sold their prayers for power and gold. He made it clear that if the gods wanted to protect the mountain, they would have to do it themselves. The Oda soldiers moved up the slopes, carrying torches and oil. One by one, the ancient wooden temples, some of the most beautiful structures in the world, began to roar with flame. The smoke grew so thick it blotted out the sky, turning the afternoon into an artificial night. The sounds of chanting were replaced by the screams of the trapped and the crackle of burning cedar. Nobunaga did not distinguish between the warrior and the priest, the young or the old. He wanted to send a message that would echo through the bones of every man in Japan. There is no sanctuary from my law, not even in heaven. By the time the fires died down, the once sacred Mount Hiei was a blackened skeleton. The libraries containing centuries of knowledge were ash. The statues of the Buddha were melted heaps of bronze. The invincible monks were gone. Kyoto watched the glow of the mountain for days, and the city was silent, with a new, bone-deep terror. This was the moment the world stopped calling him a fool and began calling him a monster. It was during this time that the shogun, Yoshiaki, sent another letter, this time to a powerful rival, calling Nobunaga an enemy of the gods. When Nobunaga intercepted the message, he didn't just get angry, he embraced the role they had given him. He wrote a letter back to his enemies, and for the first time, he signed it with a title that would stick to his name forever. Dairokuten Mao, the demon king of the sixth heaven. In Buddhist lore, this was a being who stood in the way of enlightenment, a lord of desire and destruction. Nobunaga was telling them, "If you call me a demon, then I shall be the demon that haunts your nightmares." But even as he burned the old world down, Nobunaga's mind was still obsessed with the tools of the new one. He knew that his enemies were learning to use the matchlock guns he had mastered, so he decided to take technology a step further. He looked at the vast Lake Biwa and the coastal waters where his enemies tried to block his supplies, and he realized that wooden ships were too vulnerable to fire. He summoned his master builders and gave them a task that seemed impossible: build a fleet of iron ships. These were the O-Atakabun, massive floating fortresses. They were carved from the strongest timber, but their hulls were plated with thick sheets of iron. They were designed to be immune to the fire arrows and the cannon blasts of the rival clans. They were slow, lumbering giants, but they were unstoppable. When these ironclad monsters finally sailed, they crushed the naval blockades that had choked his supply lines for years. It was a victory of engineering as much as it was a victory of war. Nobunaga was now a man standing between two worlds. In one hand, he held the torch that had burned the ancient past to the ground. In the other, he held the iron plates of the future. He had dismantled the power of the monks. He had neutralized the shogun, and he had proven that even the sea could be tamed by his will. Yet, as he sat in his magnificent new castle of Azuchi, a fortress of 7 stories decorated with gold and blue tiles, designed to be a palace of the gods, he was more alone than ever. He had become a figure of myth, a man who had transcended the limits of what a samurai was supposed to be. He spent his nights watching the flickering lights of the land he was slowly stitching back together, piece by violent piece. The great ring of fire was broken, but the sparks were still flying. New enemies were rising in the east, men like the Tiger of Kai, Takeda Shingen, whose cavalry was said to be the finest in all of Asia. Nobunaga knew that his demons were not done with him yet. He had burned the mountain, he had built the iron ships, and he had claimed the title of the Demon King. But the higher a man climbs, the colder the wind becomes, and Oda Nobunaga was now standing on the highest peak of all. As the smoke finally cleared from the charred slopes of Mount Hiei, the rest of Japan realized a terrifying truth. The old rules were dead. The gods were silent. And the man who had silenced them was just getting started. This is Shadow Forged Steel. Remember to like and subscribe to our channel so we can keep bringing the tales of feudal Japan into today. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next chapter of Oda Nobunaga.